Hello and welcome to another edition of AI Impact Talk. My name is Thembekile Mrototo. A pleasure to be back with you as we continue with the series focusing on artificial intelligence, technology, and the African continent. We will also going to talk about policy as always, as well as new innovations in the space. And today we're fortunate enough to have the company of someone who has existed both in the public and the private sector. And we'll see how those two worlds merge if Africa is truly going to become a big player in the space. Who am I talking about? Well, Dr. Vera Kamtukule needs no introduction if you're familiar with the space in Malawi. But if you need background context, let me run you through just her list of achievements. She is an executive leader, a governance leadership expert, also an author and international speaker and host of the Leadership Lab, which we're going to be talking about today. Doctor, good to have you on AI Impact Talk.
Thank you very much for having me.
I mean, I've just rattled through an impressive list of the work that you do, but I think it's worth going back a bit.
Yeah.
And looking at your foundations, where it all began before you even became a professional in both the public and the private sector.
No, thank you very much. I grew up in the ghetto, where not so many, when I go back there now, most of my friends never made it out. And
it's what we would call a township in South Africa.
It's a township, you know. So that's where I grew up, and most of my friends never made it out. And if you come out of that, and then you make something out of yourself, it means you have really worked hard. So I grew up there with both my parents, and then they separated when I was 9 years old. Then I was raised by my grandparents until the day that I left for college. So I was the first person to go to college in my family as well. So I was propelled by an insatiable desire to not be like my parents, you know, because I saw a lot of things that I didn't like, even at the age of 9. So I knew that if I didn't have school, I had nothing. So I was moved to do school. So I did my school, and then I went to college, 1 degree, 2 degrees, and then 3 degrees, and then all these academic accolades and all of that. But then I started working straight from college. I got a job, and then I continued with school.
And what sort of work are you doing then in that early stage?
At that time, then I was working with people because I've always been fascinated by public policy. So I was working with poor communities. We would come here. There's an institution called Homeless International that works in South Africa as well, but also in other parts of the country. It originated in India. So it does issues of land and housing, water and sanitation among informal settlements. So remember we had that Operation Mulambachina in Zimbabwe. That institution that was supporting communities that time is the institution that I was working with at the time. It was called Center for Community Organization and Development, but it was affiliated to the Homeless International. So I was doing that kind of work at that time. And then before my appointment as Deputy Minister in the government of Malawi, I was running an institution called Malawi-Scotland Partnership, which is like the link between Scotland and Malawi, because Scotland is not yet, it doesn't have a Scottish aid. So it needed an institution that would oversee what it is doing in Malawi. So I was running that function. So again, I was still working around the issues that I'm interested in terms of public policy, but also community development area. So basically that's how. So in the midst of all of that, I was writing. So I'm a published author of now 8 books. The 9th one is going to be published next month. So I talk about motivation. I talk about everyday life. I talk about, the potential that we have as human beings as God intended it to be, and then basically what you have to do. So for example, I use a lot of my experiences to write about how people can navigate. So for example, women were asking me, how do you do it? You are a wife, you are a mother, you are a CEO, you are doing this, you run businesses. How are you able to manage all of this?
To wear many hats.
Yes. So I wrote The Professional Woman, and the tagline there is balancing between the boardroom and the home, because you can be a beast in the boardroom and then fail dismally as a mother or as a wife. So how do you achieve that balance? So I wrote a book about it.
And is there a balance? Because I know friends who are professional women, mothers and whatever, and 2 responses that I've picked up in the last while is that a lot of them have started to resent the question, firstly, of whether there is a balance, because they say men in the same position who are married and run organizations are never asked, for example, how do you balance the two? And they feel as though it's limiting in
Yeah.
terms of what they're able to do as women.
And also, I think a lot of people think that maybe women have it easy or whatever. But I think it's not true. Achieving a balance is possible. But the reality of the issue is that women just have it a little bit difficult. The challenges that women have to navigate are a little bit different. If you are a woman, you know that you have to work 7 times harder than your male counterpart, even if you were on the same position. That's just the reality of things. You have to prove your confidence over and over again than your male counterpart. So, and then you are doing that, knowing that you also have a baby at home. She's 9 months old, he's 9 months old, and then you're still breastfeeding. And then you have relatives, you have a sick mother, you have all this that are heaped. These are social contracts that are placed on women. Human beings created them, we can change them, but I don't know how or to what extent we are changing them at the moment. So the reality of women is that. So I know that we can achieve that balance, prioritizing. For me, that's what works. What is important? So we have 24 hours. The human skull of a man is exactly the same as the human skull of a woman. So if a man can do it, why can't a woman do it? As a matter of fact, if a woman is able to navigate all those hats and titles, and she's still showing up at work and still winning at work in the corporate world, a woman is a champion. And that's what I'm telling women, and that's why I'm telling them. If you prioritize your life, you will know there are elements of your life that you shouldn't be focusing on. Focus on the things that are productive in your life.
Just on the many hats that you've worn, I mean, you were taking us through your journey as, shall we say, a scholar, firstly,
Yes.
based on how much time you spent studying. You then become a policy and community worker, right?
Yes.
And then you transition into government, first as deputy minister,
Yes.
and then officially as a minister.
Yes.
Was that a straight line transition for you? Because yours wasn't the typical journey of a public office bearer. You didn't campaign, for instance.
No, I did not. It was not a straight line. And that is why I think after my appointment, there was a lot of noise. How did this happen and all of that. And, but, I couldn't question the appointing authority. Sometimes maybe grace just locates you, So the unfortunate thing is that when people don't have answers, then they start filling the gaps, or maybe this happened because of this. Maybe this happened because of this, trying to downplay that appointment or your accolades or your competence or that you don't deserve that seat. So the long and short of it is that it was not a straight road. But I'll tell you this. Growing up, I knew, and I would tell my friends, the people that were close to me, I would tell them, one day, I'll drive a car with a flag on it. I would say that. And people would be like, oh, how is it going to happen? And I thought that I would go the conventional way, that I would go and campaign, become a member of parliament, because that's how it happens in my country. You are appointed a member of parliament. So the law doesn't stipulate that you have to be a member of parliament for you to be a cabinet minister. The president can appoint from anyone as long as you're a Malawian. You have to be a Malawian first. So I thought I would campaign and whatever. I told my mom, I said, I'm going to go into politics. My mom said, if you want to kill me, then do it. But then, so I'm sitting there in my office, and that time was COVID time. That was 11th July 2020. We had decongesting the office, so I'm working from home this week. And I get a call. Would you accept an appointment on the cabinet? And it was the shortest answer I've ever given. It would be my honor. And there began the journey until when we lost the election in 2025, September.
And from that, then, you, again, move on to something else.
Yes.
You leave government onto what you're doing now, the work that you're doing through the Leadership Lab Africa, in fact. When that happens, what then says to you, from the honor that you felt when you were invited to join cabinet, to now wanting to leave to do a separate thing?
Yes.
What determined that call for you?
I think, the past 10 to 15 years, I've been mentoring people. I've been lecturing. I teach because I hate my own ignorance. So when I acquire knowledge, I want to share it. It's a weird thing, but it is. So I teach in several universities as well, sometimes as an adjunct lecturer. So I teach. So I also teach people that come to me. So I run mentorship courses and all of that. So over the years, maybe past 15 years, I was asked the very same question, and it became intensified when I became minister. When I travel all over the world, even in my own country, I'll be asked this question: how did you get here? It's a seemingly simple question, but it is heavily loaded, because my journey cannot be explained in a sentence or a single conversation.
Because it hasn't been linear, right?
Because it hasn't been linear, neither has it been easy. You understand? So I grew up without resources. I was working close to 15 kilometers as a 5-6-year-old to school and back every single day. So you're talking about 25 to 30 kilometers every single day to a primary school. And then we moved. When my parents broke up and I was staying with my grandparents, and then we moved to another township, that distance was doubled. And I'm still a kid. But I navigated all of that. So you cannot say that I had it easy. But now when people see me, they're like, oh, no, she had it easy. Oh, it was handed to her. But it wasn't. So I was asked that question. And then it dawned on me that if a person in Armenia, so I met someone in Armenia who really clung to me and said, I really want to learn from you. And I'm like, if a person sitting in Armenia and someone sitting in Egypt, someone sitting in Malawi are asking me the very same question, that means they really want to learn. So how can I deliver this message?
So you're responding to a gap.
I'm responding to a gap. And also, because of the experiences that I've seen over the years, being in a leadership position, I became a leader at a very young age. I made my mistakes. And I want the person that is listening to me, that is watching me now, to never make those same mistakes I made. So that's why one of the things that I noted was that we are not short of resources as Africa. As a matter of fact, we are the richest continent in the world, and yet the poorest person is in Africa. That's an oxymoron. So that is the gap that I'm trying to fill. What is the problem? The problem is a leadership preparation deficit. That is the gap that I'm feeling through the lab.
So how does Leadership Lab Africa then respond to that need and answer the questions that you then had to contend with when you were first approached in Armenia and other parts of the world by other people who said, well, this is a remarkable story and I would gladly learn from you?
Okay. So I'll first answer that. I'll give you a little bit of context. The fundamental challenges of Africa, the challenges that Africa as a continent is facing, they are the same in almost many member states. All right. So number one, they are grappling with debt. Number two, they are grappling with a very narrow fiscal space. They have narrow fiscal spaces. And the third one is low productivity. So we have an insatiable desire for foreign goods. So it is killing our innovation. It is killing our productivity. We are importing and then draining our forex reserves. Those are the three fundamental challenges of most African countries. Now, here's the twist. We have abundant natural resources, tourism products that are amazing, arable land, fresh water, minerals, critical minerals that the world requires right now. And then to top all of that, we have the youngest generation. 60% of our population is under the age of 25. Our median age is 19 years old. That's a powerful demographic that no other continent has at the moment. That's the potential that we have. And yet, we are still operating dismally. We are still underperforming. What is the problem?
Why is that? Why is it that
this is what I'm going to tell you.
We've got all of those resources.
We have all of that, and that is the twist, and that's what makes me angry. So why we don't have visionary leadership that is prepared to take up the challenge? And that is the problem. So that is why I established the lab to say, okay, let us prepare the next generation of leaders that are going to say, we have seen what is wrong and we are ready to take it up. Come on. Singapore doesn't have a single mineral. Neither does Dubai. But those are some of the most successful economies in the world, which means the presence of minerals or resources is not an issue. It is the governance of the resources that is the issue. So we have a leadership preparation deficit. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe this generation we have lost it, but this one that is coming, let us raise leaders that are going to run this continent with competence, integrity, and unquestionable courage. I like the word courage because you need courage to change the trajectory of anything.
I want to ask you two things then.
Yes.
Is that a bank, shall we say, this courage that you talk about, that we all have within us, that we simply have to tap into?
Absolutely.
But added to that, how do you help to create African leaders of the future who, even despite the constraints of daily life, are able to innovate, produce, push through?
Okay. within each one of us, there's an advert that I used to like on TV, and it's about beer. I don't take beer, but I liked it. There's a drop of greatness in each one of us, and that is true. There's a drop of courage in each one of us. You just have to tap into it and then manifest. Until you tap into it, you would never know. And that is why the second reason why I established a leadership lab was to demystify what leadership is all about. Because when you're talking about leadership, most times you're just thinking about Ramaphosa, the minister, or the president, APM, and all of that. That is not true. There's leadership everywhere. There's leadership in the communities, in the churches, in schools, in the markets, at bus depots, everywhere. There's leadership. Leaders that you call leaders, they just don't drop from heaven, pa, and then like a cocoon, and then they bang. Now they are leaders. No, they are part of our community. We go to the same church. We went to school with them. So if leadership fails everywhere else, it is going to fail in government. So we are a reflection of our government. So when we are complaining about leadership here, whatever, leadership is us. We are there. We created those leaders. And therefore, if we created those leaders, we can also create another pool of leaders that are different. They're thinking differently. So what I'm saying to you now, the long and short of it, yes, we know that for us to take the innovation, so for example, we're talking about innovations. We're talking about issues of migration, people that are leaving Africa, they're going elsewhere and all of that. What are they? We cannot stop migration, but we can regulate it. But what the people really are saying is that Africa doesn't have the ecosystems and the infrastructure to handle the kind of innovation that young people are looking for. So the innovation, that courage that you're talking about that is within each one of us, it is already existing. But the infrastructure at home does not have that. So I will tell you one thing as well.
Right.
My primary school science, my teacher taught me that energy can never be created nor lost. It just transforms from one form into another. As we sit now, there's a wave of energy that is coming from young people, and I think you've seen it in South Africa as well. And we saw it in Kenya, just a couple of days ago in India, the young people were rioting, well. And the Minister of Energy has resigned. That's a wave that I'm talking about. Now, you cannot destroy something that you didn't create. That energy was not created by government. It was created from within the people. Now, the question is, are the young people themselves aware that they are containing that energy? And number two, do we have the correct system, policies and procedures and institutions in place at the moment to contain or transform that kind of energy into something productive?
To what extent then for Africa is policy a hindrance? And I ask that because you have had first-hand experience, yes, having sat in cabinet, having sat in parliament. And why is policy seemingly moving so slowly in many parts of the continent to meet the needs of the youth and the world?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll answer this in this way. So if you're talking about regional integration in terms of trade and tourism, for example, so South Africa is going to make moves and create these nice policies on, promoting tourism and all of that. And then they're going to work with Zimbabwe, Zambia, and then Malawi. But then in these three countries, the policies are not receiving the policies that South Africa has put in place. There's going to be a hindrance there.
They don't talk to each other.
They don't talk to each other. So you have policies, procedures, and institutions. So a policy is nothing if you don't have institutions that are going to run them. If the people themselves are not ready to run those kind of policies. That is why we are beautiful. We write very well. I was a government official. I know what I'm talking about. In Malawi, our policies are really well thought out. We run them. But on the ground,
implementation.
Right now, we sat down as a people in 2020 and created what we are calling the Malawi 2063, a blueprint of our development. We said, as a nation, this is where we want to go. We want to be a middle-income economy by the year 2030. We are in 2026 now. I don't know where we are. So policy is nothing if you don't have the procedures and systems and institutions in place to carry it home. So that is what is creating these kind of deficiencies within the African economy. And the other thing is, why are we not trading together as African continents using the principle of comparative and competitive advantage? Because each one of us has a comparative advantage. South Africa has platinum, you have gold, and then you have Ghana that has cocoa, Ivory Coast, Botswana has diamonds, okay, Zambia has copper, DRC has cobalt, okay? That is our comparative advantage. Why are we not leveraging on those things now? Now the issue of turning a comparative advantage as a country into competitive advantage is a matter of leadership. That is why the lab exists. Because you can have all the resources, but without leadership to turn those comparative advantage into competitive advantage, you have nothing. Which is why, as rich as we are still unable to turn those into poverty-reducing products and services for African people.
So with that context, you spoke earlier about all the many brilliant young Africans who are leaving, right, to work in Europe, in the States, especially when you look at what's happening in the tech space, innovation, etc. How do you convince them to stay on the continent when they have to go up against such a long list of obstacles?
I went to some country, I will not mention it, and then they took us out for dinner. Excuse me. And then there was a black guy that was waiting on our table. And then I asked him, I said, where are you from? And then he mentioned an African country. And I said, but you speak very well. He said, yeah, I'm actually a doctor. So this is a doctor. It takes 7 years in my country to train a doctor or a lawyer and whatever. And I want to believe that it's the same, in most African countries. We spend a lot of resources and a lot of time training our people, and then they are migrating to Europe and other countries to work in a coffee shop. That is painful. It is an anomaly that African member states need to start correcting, and expeditiously. So for me, what we need to... So it's not a matter of just convincing them to say, come back home. Come back home to what?
And do what?
And do what? So in the first place, remember I said that the infrastructure, that the terrain at home is unable to contain them. So they're saying, let me go to America. I was speaking to a progressive young lady, a Malawian, but she's now based in America. She was telling me, she's in the tech space, and she was telling me to say, Vera, even when I speak to young people that are studying IT and all these technologies in Malawi, and then I look at what I'm navigating with here, I'm like, we are way behind. We are way behind. So young people are saying, because of this vigor, this energy that they have, they'd rather go somewhere else where they feel like things are moving. My nephew, just last week, he created an app that automates the use of water. And I'm thinking, okay, I can introduce him to the water utility company, but I'm even skeptical to say, to what extent is this going to be absorbed? So you'd rather sell it to Botswana or somewhere else in another country that is already ready for that. So if you don't have a business plan, I can give you 20 million rands today, and in the next 3 months you'll have 100 rand left, because you weren't ready to have that money and to use it. You didn't have a plan of using it. So we need to fix our house first before we can call our sons and daughters from Africa that are in the diaspora to come back home. Without that, this trajectory is going to continue. They will continue migrating. So we'll be training for other coffee shops in other countries.
So that brings me back to the work of Leadership Lab Africa and what role you see the lab playing in achieving that very goal, but also technology innovation as an answer to the many problems that the continent is facing. I mean, you used an example of using tech for water purification services. We know the countries on the continent don't always have the budgets, and the terrain is not always the best for the conventional methods. So there's absolutely a need for all sorts of innovation.
Yeah. So I think the advantage that we have is that the young people are tech savvy, and what technology is doing is democratizing access to information. So, and now young people are using technology, the internet, and all of that now to create these amazing things. But I think for me, the barrier now is the absorption, and then the funding, the capacity that is required for them to scale up. So what the lab is doing, so the lab, I didn't mention this at the beginning, is more than a podcast. It's a Pan-African institution that is there to promote conversations, knowledge sharing, learning, and then mentoring, across the African continent. So that, and then the goal is we should raise competent, ethical, visionary leaders that are able and ready to take up spaces in government, in church, because these matter as well, in schools, our universities, and because how are we training our children now?
What are we training them for?
What are we training them for? Because if you have a vision as South Africa, if you have a vision as Ghana, and you're still training them in grasshoppers and the parts of an ear and the parts of a leaf, then we're missing it. So we'll forever be here. Because I remember a friend of mine, she left to another country, and then her children were like 5 steps ahead. They were meant to come down 4 classes behind, because they said, no, according to our standards here, you are way below. And these kids were top performing students in their classes, but they went back because they couldn't match. That's what I'm talking about. So for me, what technology is doing is to ensure that it is exposing not only our gaps that we have as far as the ecosystem that we require is concerned and the infrastructure, but also the institutional capacity. Because it is not enough for us to say, oh, okay, we need a lot of funding for technology and this AI and then absorption and whatever. The young people that are already here now, how are we utilizing them? How are we leveraging on technology, including AI, to empower them to take up spaces in the economy at the moment? So for me, it's about now, that is where now the government, because the government at its core does not do all of these things that we're talking about. It cannot do AI. It can have a policy on AI and whatever. But that's a private sector issue, because AI is a matter of specialization. And you can have AI in medicine, you can have AI in agriculture. So that's, government can't do that. The private sector, the academia, everyone has to chip in to ensure that all of these things are done.
So government is meant to create, in essence, an enabling environment.
Meant to create an enabling environment, and then the private sector is meant to come. However, there's a caveat there. I don't like it when, private sector is saying, oh, government must do this, and then you must reduce the taxes on it. So government is taking all the shots. All the bullets government is taking is making a lot of moves, up to 70%. And then the private sector is just leveraging on that to make a massive profit, but it is not making moves that are commensurate with the moves of the government.
They also are taking, isn't it, and I don't mean this as a blanket statement, one of the gripes is that the big corporates then take the money out of the continent and don't pour it back into, for example,
that's why I'm saying,
skilling for the workplace of the future.
That's why I'm saying the moves of the private sector must be commensurate with the moves of the government. So the government, so it's a two-way thing. The government comes and says, oh, okay, you want to do this, you want to establish this powerhouse or this lab or whatever, no problem. What do you need? We need this, we need that, we need that. However, okay, so if we do that as government, what are you going to do? Oh, we're going to create so many jobs. We're going to do this. We're going to run all these schools and whatever. So, for example, if you talk about mining, and then we talked about us being naturally endowed as a continent and all of that, but the poorest people are where? Are in Africa.
Those communities.
What is happening? So you are leaving communities, mining communities, for example, to negotiate about these things on their own. Come on, they wouldn't know that. So for most communities, they just want that borehole there, that health center there,
jobs.
And then that jobs. But then the jobs, what kind of jobs? The lower end jobs. When what they should be demanding are scholarships for their children to become engineers, to become architects, to become mining engineers. What they should be demanding, it should be infrastructure, tangible infrastructure. Because once minerals are taken out, they're never being replaced. So those are the things. So for me, the moves of the private sector must measure up with the moves that the government are making. So don't just leverage on the subsidies that government is giving you. Make moves to ensure that there's a win-win situation for both government and the private sector.
So reshaping, restructuring, even how we think about beneficiation for mineral-rich communities. But perhaps as we end, when you look at the journey that you've traveled and what you've seen from the rest of the world and especially the continent, are you optimistic about the future?
Absolutely. Like I told you, like the young people that we're dealing with now are woke. They're not like us. Us, we're told, work hard in school and then get good grades, and then opportunity is going to come knocking on your door with your name on it. It will be delivered by DHL. That's what we're told. If you believe in yourself, things are going to happen. Now that trajectory, it's no longer there. It changed. So the young people that we're dealing with now are woke. They are tech savvy. They know what they want. They are demanding accountability. That gives me hope. And number two, for me, we are still having that advantage. But advantage is that if you don't take advantage of your potential or your advantage, it is squandered. It is a national or a global or a continental tragedy in this case. So what we need to do, what is giving me hope, is the fact that young people are willing to do things. Almost 70% of the people that I mentor, They're running their own institutions. Some have 2 companies, some have 3. So everyone wants to be an executive director. It fascinates me. I'm like, oh my God, I never thought about that when I was 18 years old or 21 years old. I wasn't thinking like that. But young people now are thinking like that. That is giving me hope to say they are ready for leadership. But they must be prepared for those leadership positions. Why? Because power has a funny way of exposing incompetence. Power in the hands of a leader that was unprepared for that position is like a gun in the hands of a 10-year-old. So we don't want that. So we need to prepare them. And here is why. If we do that, we are going to set them up to run these multinational companies, businesses, and across the sectors with integrity and with courage, like I said. And therefore, the future that we want as Africa will not come about as an accident. It will be intentional and well crafted by Africans for Africa.
Dr. Vera Kamtukule, a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
On AI Impact Talk, and I hope you as well have enjoyed the conversation here on AI Impact Talk. We'll be bringing you many more of these discussions. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.